I see everything that you are. I always have. Don't be afraid. You have so much pain in you. You. So much rage. That you can't contain it. You and I are the same. So, who's the monster?
Welcome back to the Cinema Club podcast. My name is Christopher Amick, and I'll be your host for today's episode. The Cinema Club is like a book club, but for movies. Every episode, we invite members of the Cinema Club to be co-hosts for the episode, who'll choose the movie or television show, and join us on the podcast to talk about that film or show. Today, I am with Jesse Tashi and John Roney, and we are covering the entire Echo Marvel Disney Plus show. How's it going, guys?
Great. Hello, everyone.
Doing great. Thanks for having us on again, Chris.
Absolutely. It's been fun. I feel like going back to the Marvel well with you both for the past, I don't know, like 8 months or so now that I'm thinking about it. But yeah, it was a big endeavor when I was like, hey, are you guys down to binge watch Echo and then turn around and talk about it? So I appreciate you both being down.
Yeah, I'm excited. It's always fun to do that.
Yeah, which thankfully, I guess, at least thankfully in a binging viewpoint, the show was only 5 episodes long. It was doable in an afternoon. And I thought it was also really interesting when I was reflecting on getting together with you both, just because in our Marvel rankings episode, that was a lot of fun with the both of you. The character in Hawkeye that we had ranked, Jesse and I hadn't been too huge on Hawkeye, if I remember correctly. But
Correct.
John, you'd had a blast with the Hawkeye show. It was great hearing why you really connected and enjoyed it. But I think I had told you both at that time, I thought that the show just didn't do a very good job of introducing Maya's character in Hawkeye. And so I was not very interested in the show at all, which I've been texting you both about for a few months. But the first trailer dropped, and it took me from zero interest to very interested just in that 2-minute long trailer, which was definitely more of a street level, gritty kind of showcase for Maya's character, which again, I felt like I hadn't really seen that too much in the Hawkeye show, but they also were showcasing more of her cultural background too in the trailer.
So I don't watch any trailers beforehand because I'm a nerd. So I like to go in clean because if I watch a trailer, I will spin all the theories ahead of time. And sometimes my theories are better than the product. So I set myself up for failure. But anyway, so I hadn't seen the trailer for this yet. And I accidentally clicked on the trailer when I was watching it here with Max. I accidentally clicked on the trailer instead of play the first episode. When we got done with it, Max was like, okay, so this is them telling all the Disney Plus viewers that this is completely different and this is going to be violent and gritty and viewer discretion advised. But it was a good trailer. It felt like it immediately brought you into what it was going to be, and it was great. But it also didn't reveal too much because that's my big gripe with theaters. With trailers is
They
like,
showed them in theaters too. That's okay.
yeah, there you go. Sometimes they literally tell the entire story. But this didn't. It gave us like a good flavor of, hey, you're in for this ride.
That's interesting that you usually don't watch trailers, but watch this one, because I usually watch trailers for stuff. And then this one is one, for whatever reason, I never watched the trailer. So I went in pretty blind, other than like knowing who she was from Hawkeye. But I agree with what you were saying, Chris, about like in Hawkeye, she was not all that interesting of a character. Like she was very much a secondary character. Like they gave a tiny bit of her background, but it wasn't like, oh, this girl's really interesting. I'm super curious. What's her deal? So I didn't go in with a ton of expectations or hype for this.
Yeah, based on what you said, question for you guys. I feel like, and granted, maybe this is because I don't interact with this stuff they do put out, so maybe it's just fallen out of my algorithm. But do they not market these movies or shows anymore? Because I'll go to school and I'll be like, oh, hey, are you guys excited to see the Marvels? Oh, hey, are you guys going to watch this when it drops on Disney Plus? And literally nobody knows anything about anything. I haven't even seen any marketing for any of these things sometimes. I know they're happening, but I don't feel like they market them like they used to. So maybe they're like writing on the fact that it's Marvel, so everybody's going to watch it. We don't need to even market.
Yeah, I can't say like how well they are marketing or not, but I feel like in general, there's kind of some Marvel fatigue going around. I think if they nail the next couple movies or whatever, I think the hype will be back fully. But I think for now they're gonna lull, and so I think that might be why it's not as hype. But I don't know. It's a good question though.
I didn't see very much advertising on social media platforms and YouTube. However, I do watch a lot of football during football season, and they at least once every game had a commercial for this show. So I will say I did see at least a 30-second trailer for Echo when watching football every Sunday.
That makes so much sense because I don't have anything that has ads on it, any sort of TV or watch anything that has ads. So that would make sense why I don't get ads.
Yeah, not all my streaming platforms, but a lot of them I do have the ad option, like Hulu, I have the ad option, YouTube, Paramount Plus. Speaking of the trailer, Disney was like, change your settings to MA to experience this dark, gritty show. And I was like, okay, Disney, this show is at best PG-13. This is not a
Was it
mature
rated MA?
show. I don't know. Disney was like, change your settings on your system to MA to watch this show. And I was like, geez, okay.
It's just because of Kingpin in general.
Yeah, I don't know what would have been in it to make it higher than PG-13.
Yeah.
I don't remember there being any swearing. There might have been a little bit, but there wasn't a lot of it for sure. And there's some blood and violence, but it wasn't like gratuitous amounts of blood. I don't know. I think they're just hyping it up as like, this is dark, gritty MCU.
Yeah, which again, as someone that did watch the trailer ahead of time, I was like, okay. I don't know. I had mixed feelings about that because I almost feel like I got led on a little bit.
Yeah.
But it was still something I really enjoyed. I have been watching Your Honor on Paramount Plus, which is a Showtime original show. That is definitely a mature rated television show. And so I've been watching both these shows this week, and I'm like, man, Disney, again, totally fine that it's a PG-13 kind of rated, or TV-14, maybe, rated show. But I was like, okay, maybe Disney needs to have an in-between setting if they're going to be like, hey, either it's Disney animated shows, Fox and the Hound, or it is blood and guts. I think there should be some kind of in-between settings so that we know as audience members what to expect to. If they're going to be, again, pushing that, in their advertising moving forward.
Do you think they have to because they are Disney and so they have to make that distinction? Like, this is not family friendly? Because I personally have seen in my social media, like, when some of these things have come out, like Cruella, for instance, there are moms all over that are like, oh my goodness, I wish I was warned. I can't believe I let my child watch this. This is way too crazy. Disney, I'm upset with you. So maybe they just have to be like, okay, so this is one of our properties, but maybe use your discretion and be smart. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like Disney's always been like just really protective of its brand. And generally, for a lot of their movies that they make for adults, like they use a different studio for a lot of their stuff. So I think they just are really intentional because, yeah, like they don't want the type of backlash they got from Cruella. I never saw it, but I doubt it was that insanely dark or whatever. But yeah,
I will say, getting back to more of the actual beginning of the show, not to go off too much, I did think they did a really nice job in the first like 5-10 minutes of the show, running through Maya's story and how Hawkeye and Kingpin are part of her story. Like I instantly knew what was up going into the show, which was great because, be transparent, it had been a minute since I watched Hawkeye. And so I was like, okay, what is the character's background again? So I think they did a nice job with that.
I was thankful for that reminder too, because I definitely haven't watched it since it came out.
I just gotta say, I'm shocked you guys didn't rewatch Hawkeye before this. You guys rated it.
I almost went back and rewatched the last episode because I was trying to remember, does Kingpin get shot by Maya? He does. Okay. Okay. Because so I got on Disney Plus. I go to the episodes to select episode 1. And right there in the description, it says Maya Lopez flees the criminal underworld of NYC after killing Kingpin. And I was like, oh my God, why would they spoil like that? I had totally forgotten that it happened in Hawkeye. So yeah, I'm sorry, John. I really dropped the ball on rewatching that one.
No, you're good. You're good.
I also hadn't remembered that Maya had her leg amputated in that car crash. So I had forgotten that she had the prosthetic leg. So yeah, there was a lot of stuff that I had forgotten about this character when it comes to Hawkeye. So I am very grateful that they really got me fully caught up, and then I was ready to go for the rest of the season.
So
Yeah, it was nice that they didn't make you do the homework like that. They're like, yeah, if you never watched Hawkeye, like you can just jump in and we'll give you enough of the background that that's fine.
fun fact, the actress herself is an amputee. The character from the comics is only deaf. She's not deaf and an amputee, but because the actress is, they included that in part of her story, which I thought was really cool.
That is super
Okay.
cool. I did not know that. Thanks for sharing that, Josie. I was watching an interview with that woman that plays Maya. It was a virtual interview, so it was over like a Zoom. But I thought it was really cool that there was an interpreter there doing ASL and everything. But yeah, I thought that was really cool that not only are we honing in on a character from the comics that I had never heard of personally, to be transparent, before Hawkeye, but that she was coming from so many different background areas, whether it was her culture or differently abled in multiple ways. So I thought it was really cool just in that aspect that we had a kick-ass woman like that.
I didn't realize the actress was deaf. That's cool.
Yeah. Yeah.
What's her name, by the way? Like, I don't actually.
Alakwa Cox.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Jess has got the knowledge. She's dropping it.
Whenever we're watching something, I like spit out the actor's name, and Max is like, how do you know that? And I'm like, okay, it's because I'm actually interested in acting as a profession. So these are my people I look up to professionally. So that's why I know all these things.
Don't watch a trailer, but I know every single person involved in this production. I love it. I was going to say too, like the show, and maybe this is where some more of the mature aspects come in, because it does get heavy right off the bat with the whole car accident. And for me, like the emotional was like, ooh, that's tough, was when Maya is thinking that she's guilty for her mom being hurt / dead when she's in the hospital because they had went to go get hot cocoa that evening. It really helped me understand the character, like what her journey to where she's become now. So I really thought that was great that they were giving us a whole backstory on her character, basically in 2 main episodes of the show.
This is skipping way ahead because I think it's in the last or second to last episode. I get that, like, when you're raised in a certain environment, obviously things happen to you. But then just adding on to her backstory and having that scene with the ice cream man really solidified Kingpin has fully taken over as her person, as her caretaker, as the only thing she has. It makes sense that she has taken these darker turns. And that scene was like wild and hard to watch, but I can also get it. Like when you're a kid and people are not respecting you and they just won't listen. And on multiple fronts, they're not listening because she has disadvantages that most of us don't deal with. It was a wild scene, but it makes sense that she is the way she is because this is the person she had to look up to. This was all she had.
Great point. Yeah, I was rooting for Fist to beat the shit out of that ice cream man. But then Maya runs over and she hits him. And again, that was the whole like, whoa moment for me because it again clicked for me how these things happened and shaped who she became. And again, like you were saying, why she trusts Fisk so much.
Yeah, I thought that was probably the strongest part of the show for me was that dynamic between her and Kingpin or Fisk. I thought it was really just interesting. I thought it was pretty layered. How you can tell he cares about her, but also he's very manipulative. So it's a great example of a relationship that's toxic, even though he does love her. Like he's not a healthy person and he's not showing that love to her in a healthy way.
Mm-hmm. And I like how they kept it consistent because, like, in the Daredevil show, which obviously is not necessarily part of this universe, but is whatever. In the Daredevil show, they show a good job of, let's be honest, his psychosis. Like, he's not a sane person, but they do a good job in showing in his psychosis that he is capable of these very deep feelings and this love that he has with Vanessa. And so I like that they kept it consistent with Maya, that this man feels deeply, whether it's anger, whether it's love, whatever it is, he is a very emotional person and will act on it. I like that they kept it consistent between Vanessa and Maya.
Yeah, and I was gonna say, I don't think I watched season 3 of Daredevil. I did watch, I believe, seasons 1 and 2 way back in the day when those were like just coming on Netflix. So I didn't really remember if, like you're saying, if Fisk was consistent in this show with that version of Fisk. So it's good to hear that. Sounds like they were doing that other version or the same version, or when look at it, of Fisk justice. I will say too, I really loved how there were moments in the show where we really got to perceive things with no sound, perceive things in a manner in which Maya's character would be perceiving things. Like in episode 1, when she's in that bike shop and the cops arrive and she makes the bike crash into the cop car. There's no sound, just the glass shattering everywhere. Scenes like that where we always anticipate a lot of noise, a lot of sensory overload. I thought that was really a cool choice to take that route when it came to filming.
I wish they would have done it more. Have either of you watched Only Murders in the Building on Hulu?
Yeah.
Okay, there is an episode where it's from the perspective of the one character's son who is deaf, and almost that entire episode is from his point of view. And it was like so good, and I was watching it and I was like, you can really get into his world. And so I was expecting that to happen in this, and I feel like they only gave us small portions of it. They gave us just tiny moments that felt like they were only 30 seconds to maybe 2 minutes. And I wanted there to be like an entire full fight sequence that was entirely that. I wanted more, but I did really like what they did do.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up that episode because I thought of that a lot. Well, as much as I was like, oh, this reminds me of Only Murders in the Building, the death episode. But yeah, I'm glad they didn't do a lot more than they did. A little bit more would have been cool, but I'm glad they didn't do most of the show silent. But
Right.
I do think like when they did it, it was a really cool change of pace that does catch you off guard when the fight scene is going crazy. Especially, I think it was the third episode when they're fighting in the skate house or whatever they called it. And they're playing like heavy rock over the scene. And then they cut to it's just like her point of view and it's just all quiet. And I was like, oh, that was a neat change of pace, like how they went back and forth within that scene.
Yeah, I was going to say with that blacklight fighting sequence, I thought visually in the bowling alley and the roller skate rink, that was really cool. And I definitely enjoy those kinds of fighting scenes. I did want to ask you both, though, what your thoughts on the choreography slash cuts were, especially in that fight, because I felt like it left something lacking at times. And it was almost goofy when she is grabbing the shooting game, like grabs the guns, and then she has the cords attached and she's like whipping people with it. I was like, okay, that's when it like went a little like too goofy for me. Some of the other fights, though, I did really like. I really enjoyed the whole fight sequence where Daredevil shows up. I guess we can talk about that a little bit as well. They tried to do like a quote unquote one shot fight sequence with Daredevil, but it was very obviously not a one shot fight sequence. What did you guys think about that? Or at any of the fights, actually?
I thought the cool part of the fight scenes were like how they interspersed the like silent audio against whatever other noises and music was playing at other times, like the back and forth there. I thought was really well done in most of these scenes, but I don't know if it was the choreography or if it was like CGI, but something just felt off in a lot of the fight scenes where it's all, I almost feel like I'm watching WWE or something where I can tell it's fake. I know it's a TV show. We're supposed to have that suspension of disbelief, but I don't know, like I didn't have it for part of it.
Yeah, particularly in this show, I felt like more was fake than sometimes Marvel does. I felt like there was a little bit more CGI people, and I was like, oh, okay, maybe we just didn't have a budget to hire actual stunt doubles that can actually do these things, and so we're having to make fake people and fake movements. But I can't speak a ton on the fight sequences because they're always my least favorite part of movies and shows, unless they do them interestingly or differently. I felt like that was one of the only strong points in Secret Invasion is the Skrulls had a completely different way of fighting. So it was interesting to watch how that played out. Or in Shang-Chi, again, interesting to watch the fight scenes because they're different from what I'm used to. But if it's just like street level fighting, they're honestly the most boring scenes to me in these things. And so I don't have a ton to say on them other than what you were saying, John. This one was nice because you had that perspective switch of the silent versus the sound.
That's a good point. And I do feel MCU properties as a whole are lacking when it comes to fight sequences being done well. But I just felt like this show, especially, like I was really noticing it here and there. I was like, oh, that's weird. But I still was enjoying them. I really liked kind of the storylines that were a lot of times playing out in the first warehouse fight, how Maya puts the security guard in his place when he was filling her up. And then
that one was nice. I did like that.
Yeah. Then he proceeded to beat the shit out of him 5 minutes later. That was great. And she signs like you again. That stuff was really cool. Seeing Daredevil was cool. That was something that was in one of the trailers. So I did know that was coming. But so really cool to see him pop in. And I was thinking ahead of time, oh, how are these characters going to communicate? I think it worked okay because they didn't really need to. Like Daredevil was just saying a few lines and then it was over. So that worked okay. But I did have that thought process before. One of them is blind and one of them is deaf. So how does that kind of work out?
A little bit on that note, I found it interesting that all of her family members, when she goes back home, still know sign language. They keep talking about how it's been 20 years. It's been 20 years. It's been 20 years. So either they held out hope that she would come back, and so they're going to need sign language, or they just liked signing and having the ability to have a second language. Let's keep it up. Because at first it threw me off. I was like, how do they all still know it? But Max, he took an ASL class in college. And so he was like, when you have a family member who is deaf, it does become part of your culture. And I was like, okay, that makes sense. But also she was gone for 20 years. But it probably means something as far as their characters go that they kept it up, hoping she would return. Ooh, just had this thought right now. Actually, they probably did do it purposefully because all of them keep the ASL up, but Fisk doesn't learn. And she specifically points that out. And that's why you got these contacts, because you don't want to even bother learning it for me. It probably was a direct decision on the director and casting people's part so that there was this clear distinction between who really cares about her and who doesn't.
That's a really good point. I did, like, from a tech perspective, think the whole eye contact lens ASL thing was super cool. And I was like,
So
oh, maybe they will make something like that where you wear like special gloves or something. That could be a game changer for sure. I need to ask my sister about that because that's what she majored in and what she does all day with
wow.
kids. But yeah, that's a really good point about family prioritizing keeping that alive over 20 years. Also, episode 1, we find out Kingpin is alive. That was major. I was like, holy shit, this guy's alive. You get shot in the face 2 feet away. Okay, I want to see what happens with this. That was big.
Yeah, I really thought he would be wearing an eye patch the rest of it or something, because I thought he was shot in the eye, but it must have just been like just to the side. Like, did she not have great aim, or last second had a change of heart? Like, I don't remember the scene with, I guess, from Pocket. Like, how was that not a kill shot?
The Hawkeye, they don't reveal what happened. They cut to black and all we hear is a gunshot. It just leaves us assuming what happened.
Gotcha. Because he doesn't have any superpowers, right? Like, he's just a really big, tough guy, right?
Right.
I believe so, yeah. That's why I was confused too. I was like, wait, this guy's still alive. Okay.
This guy didn't take the scroll serum or something, right?
Right.
Right.
He's always unbelievable. I get that he is a large person, and so maybe he can handle more things than a regular person. But some things do seem unbelievable with his character unless something fishy is going on. I get that, like, when you have all the money in the world at your disposal, you have access to things regular people don't. But even that seems like a stretch if you literally get shot point blank. But yeah, I was expecting him to be alive because in the comics, this is a storyline where she does go up against him and she does shoot him and he does wear an eye patch. He does lose his eye. And so I knew that this is where they would probably go because a while back they had also talked about the new Daredevil series and how he would be in it. So I knew he had to be alive somehow. And because of the comics, I knew that this was the storyline. So it wasn't surprising for me, but I'm glad you all had that moment.
Hi there, this is Chris again, editor Chris, I should say. And I just wanted to take a moment to share that if you are enjoying the content that we are putting out on the Cinema Club, or maybe even if this is your first time listening in on the Cinema Club, we are completely supported by you, our listeners. So if you are loving the show, and if you are feeling generous, please consider clicking the support button on the Cinema Club's website. You can check that out at podcasters.spotify.com/pod/show/the Cinema Club to keep the show running and growing. It definitely does take a few subscriptions to use software and editing programs for these episodes on the Cinema Club. So any generosity financially is definitely appreciated. With that, let's jump back into our coverage on the Cinema Club. I was going to ask, what is Marvel Spotlight?
Oh, okay. So they created it. This is the first one that's in it. And I think this is just what they're going to use going forward for some of these just random character stories. They might go back and be like, oh, also Moon Knight is a Marvel Spotlight. Or any of these shows that moving forward are self-contained characters that don't necessarily have to connect to the larger MCU. And it's also a way, I was reading, apparently they get a lot of complaints that they feel like you have to watch everything if you want to watch one thing in Marvel. So this is their way to be like, this one you don't. You can just exclusively watch just this one and you don't have to have any prior knowledge of anything else in the MCU. It's just an interesting character dive.
That's interesting. And also, you could skip this then. But this is considered MCU canon, right? This happened in the MCU, right?
Yep. The Spotlight is canon but it's not
It's like
for
side
the
story
people.
stuff, basically.
Yeah, exactly. If it's a video game, it's a side mission. It's not a main quest. So you can still get to the end of the game without playing it. But if you want that extra fun and that context, then yes, watch it.
That XP
Yeah.
up. Okay, that helps. Thank you.
I'm curious. I hadn't watched the trailer beforehand. The opening scene, that was the first thing into the show for me, with the cave, with like her ancestors. So for me, I was like, oh, I was expecting this to be much more of a street level show. And then that kind of threw me off because it felt like, oh, are we going like big mystical and stuff? And so what did you guys think of the street level? But then there's some of these other like mystical powers at play as well.
I did like that they touched on the genesis story of this tribe and of her specific ancestral line, from my understanding. I didn't like that the show didn't really dive too much into the actual culture and how it is a prominent part of Maya's character, though. Because I was honestly excited to get to explore Maya's culture. And looking back on the show, I don't really feel like we got to do that much. It's more of, this is my interpretation, of course, too. It's more of just another grandma, another grandpa / pawn shop owner, another childhood friend. And it wasn't so much about Maya's family within that culture, which seems very important to all these characters. So I had mixed feelings about that. Like I thought the Genesis story was really cool, but I also wish that we had gotten along with that more of the Native American culture in there as well.
So 2 things. First thing, this was added into this version, like to the cinematic version of the character. The comic character is just a good martial artist. That's her only power. She's just a great fighter. She doesn't have like mystical powers. She doesn't have actual super powers per se. This was added in to bring in more of the culture, which I think was a good idea, but you said you should have done it more. I really liked how, I don't know if you noticed, but each of the episodes is titled after one of those characters, like the character that they delve a little bit more into that episode. So that's really cool. And it's cool that they went throughout this line of great women, but I did want more. From a history perspective, I wanted more because I'm a history nerd. From being very interested in Native American culture, I wanted more. And I just don't think it did a great job. I think it was telling 2 stories, and they should have picked one story to tell.
Yeah, I think every episode we got a little historical snippet sometime, usually at the beginning of the episode, which I, again, really enjoyed seeing that trace back. Didn't really know exactly where they were going with the power aspect of it until we got to the end, obviously. But yeah, I appreciated and I really enjoyed what they gave us. But like you're saying again, Jesse, I wish they had delved into that a little bit more. What are your thoughts, John?
Yeah, it just initially threw me off because I was like, oh, I really expected this to be, because how I'd heard people talk about the trailers of a gritty show. And then like for them to go more mystical at first, I was like, this seems like an odd combination. I mean, it fits culturally, but it didn't really feel as connected with her. Like they did a better job, especially when they got to episodes where they delve more into her relationship with her mom, of tying it to her more personally. But yeah, it did seem a bit odd of, okay, now we're doing the mystical part of it. Now we're doing the like street level. And most of the street level was a lot of hanging out and talking in pawn shops and like stuff. So it wasn't like a super dark, gritty show for the most part. I don't know. I thought it was good. I think there were some parts they did with the healing stuff that I thought made the show, like with giving Maya powers, that made it part of the show a little bit better, but also made it a little bit worse. Like I think it made the finale better and worse because she had the powers. I don't know if we want to talk about that's jumping too far ahead, but
No, I just wanted to throw out something before we go into the finale. I always love a good train heist scene. So I was like, hey, they're doing that trope, but I'm totally here for it. So I really enjoyed, though, that they did some things a little bit different with this one. Like, it was great seeing some of that train scene through Maya's perspective again with no sound.
speaking of the train scene, I saw a post one time where this person goes through every every MCU movie that was out at the time and rates it based on like how many trains are in it and what happens on the trains.
That's awesome. I have not seen that. I, I again though, I'm a sucker for train sequences, like the new Indiana Jones and the Dell of Destiny that
Yeah.
has a train heist scene, which I just ate right up. So big fan.
That was stronger
Enjoyed it.
scene in this show. That I really enjoyed. I did enjoy that scene.
Okay, now we can go into last episode. John.
No, I wasn't trying to jump into
No,
that.
you're totally good.
I realize I'm starting to touch on it. So with her having the powers, it made that seem better and worse for me because I feel like when she's trust me, and that's a cool moment when she's not trust me. Okay, everyone's starting to make that connection and like that moment you trust this person who disappeared for so long, but you love her and she's back. That was a really cool moment between her and her cousin. And then all the women there have that power, but it's not just like a healing power, but also seems as like, okay, there's some sort of like energy power that's going with it.
Yeah.
And I feel like all the women there getting it, and then none of Kingpin's minions having it took a lot of the tension out of the scene because like, oh, like this is not an even fight at all. The people on one side all have powers and there's equal numbers of them. So obviously they're going to win. So I feel like it made that part of it a little bit worse. But I thought the way she touches Kingpin and goes back with him into his memory of hearing his dad abusing his mom and just that anger that has driven him for so much of his life. Basically, his whole life is driven by just that anger. She's justified in feeling that, but trying to get him to let go of it. I thought that was really powerful, and it's also not entirely clear. Does he or does he not? Seems like he does, but also it doesn't fully, and I thought that was cool.
I think for me, what you're saying about this last episode is a great thing to say about the series as a whole. The good parts of it were good, but I don't know, it's just both. It's just good and not great too, which is sad because I wanted it to be amazing because I'm very interested in this character and in Native American stuff, and I'm glad there's more Native American content out there now. I am Cherokee. It's very distant. My great grandma was full blood Cherokee. I am like very interested in the history and the culture of everything. And I get excited when we finally tell stories from any different culture than just mainstream Western white culture. So I maybe had my hopes too high, but I wanted it to be better than it was. By the time it was done, and even in the middle of it, in the middle of the series, I'm like, what is this even about? I don't know what the central conflict is necessarily, other than her relationship with Kingpin. And by the end, I mean, I guess you could consider it like a coming of age show, but I don't know. There was just a lot and a little all at the same time.
Yeah, I was confused in the last episode where she has that moment with her mom, where her mom's telling her, you have to stay and fight for your family. Like, don't run, stay and fight for your family. But isn't her family only in danger if she does stay? Because Kingpin's trying to just use them to get to her. Like, it's not like Kingpin actually wants to hurt his family. He's just going to do whatever it takes. So if Maya's out of the picture, like, I didn't understand why her family would be in danger. So I get wanting to stay and be part of your family, even if it's tough, but I also didn't feel like there was a reason she needed to come back and fight. Or they do a good job with the storytelling of like why her family's in danger if she's not there.
Exactly.
Great point, John. Yeah, I had a few issues with this last episode. I felt like they made Kingpin's character kind of this whiny rage monster in the last episode. Maya doesn't show up at the plane, so he throws a fit and plans to kill Maya's family and the whole party. And then, like you were saying, suddenly Maya's family all has hand-to-hand combat skills. And I was watching, I was like, okay, like, I guess this is how this power does work, but it still felt a little unearned almost. And it took away from the street levelness that I was really enjoying about the show. And then there was just like weird stuff happening, like Maya's uncle taking the time to put a silencer on his pistol when there's this guy about to blow up all these people.
Yeah.
I'm like, that's the priority? Okay. Also, I have mixed feelings about the scene you talked about. It sounds like you would really enjoy, John, the humanizing Kingpin moment. Because I do sometimes feel like less is more with villains. And sometimes it's cool to have our villains be more in the shadows and mysterious. So I did have mixed feelings about that. I'm glad that really worked for you, though. And then he's back at 100% now and prepping to become mayor of NYC. So I did think that it was interesting that it decided to close that way.
That was a neat post-climax scene. That's a cool idea to do as a subplot within the Daredevil series or whatever.
Absolutely. But yeah, like you were saying, Jesse, I feel like the highs were pretty good in this show. And then the lows like really took me down. There's certain scenes that just really hit home, I think. Like the one that comes to mind is when the ASL interpreter is being killed as Fisk
Mhm.
and Meyer having dinner. And man, that's some cold blooded shit when they're just eating dinner. Maya's oblivious to
Oblivious,
this
complete.
happening, and Fisk is just eating his dinner as this woman is begging for her life and being shot in the hallway. There's scenes like that where I feel are really well done and really make me enjoy the show on just a storyline perspective, like seeing those little things. And then there's stuff like the ending where it just wasn't quite landing for me personally.
Mhm.
Yeah, there was no reference to the blip, but other than that, this felt like the most post-Endgame show. It feels like it just summarizes how the MCU as a whole's been. Of the stuff that works still works as well or almost as well as like anything that's worked before, but then there's more stuff that just doesn't work as well.
I wonder why, because I feel like this is, like you're saying, has been the theme, and I feel like part of it is because they're trying to tell too much too fast. Because I feel like in this show, you had two really good opportunities. Because all the Kingpin scenes with her growing up with him and being his adopted daughter were good. The ice cream scene was good. That ASL interpreter dinner scene was great. That scene blew my mind because as she's walking out of the dining room and into the hallway and there's plastic up, I'm like, "Oh no, he planned this. Oh, wild." But anyway, so I feel like we could have had an entire show that was exploring the complexities of their relationship as adopted father, daughter, and like her coming to terms with that and trying to get out of that relationship. And then, or I guess, or we could have had a show of her coming back home after all this trauma and trying to rebuild her life and figure out where she's going from there. But instead, we're trying to do both of them simultaneously, and it's not working because we're not delving into either of those enough. But when we do, it's amazing.
Yeah, I'd agree. I think for me as well, there was some really good action at times. And then we already talked about some of the issues with some of the action scenes. But also, there's really good character moments, and there's a lot of parts of it that felt very slow. Like, it felt like it was paced slow for how much that they were trying to fit in and for how short of a season it was. So it's an odd thing. And I don't know why they decided to go even shorter with the episode amount. Because 6 is the standard, and we've a few of the seasons that have been 9. I don't know why this one was 5, though. That felt odd.
Yeah, I was gonna say up through episode 3, I thought the pacing was really good for me personally. But like I think maybe both hints in that a little bit. I think it could have benefited with a 7 episode season if
Mhm.
we had spent a little bit more time with these characters, or maybe even make like episodes 4 and 5 just an hour long and just put a little more story in there. I think it would have landed a little bit better. Even if we were exploring a little bit more of her abilities and maybe her finding out how she can channel that ability more and stuff like that, I think would have made the ending land a little bit better for me personally. Positive note, I just thought about it. I do think the actress, Aliko Cox, I think she bulked up quite a bit since Hawkeye. So you could
Yeah.
even see in the flashback sequences, oh dang, she got ready for this show, which I think is really cool. I was going to ask you, when it comes to the Spotlight productions, from your understanding, then, are these kind of characters like Echo? Are we going to be seeing more of them in the future? Or is this going to be like a little side story, like you were saying, on the way to the main mission that we maybe won't touch on, or they may not pop up again potentially?
Give you two different answers. The first answer is I could see her popping up in other Spotlight productions, or maybe she has a cameo in Daredevil, or any of these stories that already relate to New York and her story. And maybe we get her in the Avengers Endgame kind of film if we ever get a film like that again. But my second answer is I truly have zero idea, because everything's up in the air now with the strikes that happened and them taking a big break from things, with the Jonathan Majors thing and firing him. I don't know what they're planning anymore. I don't know what's happening. I have no idea what it looks like moving forward. Yeah, could be either of those paths. Could be
Okay.
either.
Because I was thinking like maybe she'll show up in Daredevil
Yeah.
or in whatever Fisk is going to be in the future.
I think the point of these spotlights and how they might use them is that these are opportunities to zoom in on stories. And so we can use these characters and other properties, but we're not gonna spend any time on them, developing them necessarily. Because she was introduced in Hawkeye, she might show up in other things, but maybe in that context. Maybe in just she's this street level fighter that used to work for Fisk. We might not necessarily harken back to anything that happened in these spotlights.
So no Echo season 2 probably.
I would guess not.
Okay. Speaking of season 2, very excited. Moon Knight is coming back with a season 2 officially.
Oh, awesome. When that's scheduled for?
I have no idea.
Fair enough.
Do you know, Jesse?
Nope, like I said,
Okay.
I have no idea. I didn't even know What If season 2 was happening until they dropped the announcement like, hey, next week, all of everything is dropping every day.
That's true. It was like a daily occurrence, right?
It was beautiful. I loved it. It was the best Christmas present I could have asked for. I loved it so much. I'm very excited for Moon Knight. We were talking about this earlier as far as wishing they had done more integration of her culture as a Native American. And I think Moon Knight is a perfect example of integrating a culture well, in my opinion. I don't know a ton Egyptian culture, but from everything I've heard critically and from what I do know of Egyptian culture, because I really like Egyptian culture and I'm a nerd about it, they did phenomenally. And I watched many interviews with the director and some of his intentional decisions that he made, such as showing that the pyramids of Giza aren't isolated out in the desert somewhere. They're right next to the edge of Cairo. You can see them anywhere you are in Cairo. They're not far away. They're literally in someone's backyard. The music was entirely done by an Egyptian composer. Everything was integrated so well. That's a perfect example of how they maybe could have gone with this series and they didn't quite stick the landing with that. The moments that they did were beautiful and wonderful, and I really appreciated it. And I did appreciate that end title card where they were like, thanks to the Choctaw Nation and the help they gave us on this series. I'm sure they really did do their research and they really did respect the culture a lot. I wish it just was integrated a little bit more.
Yeah, I agree with everything you just said. I don't know what else to say except I'm very excited for Moon Knight season 2. It was my favorite show in our whole rankings, and I've just been hoping, are we gonna get a renewal? Are we gonna get a second season? Oh man, I'm so happy. I don't care when it comes out. Sometime in the next 4 or 5 years, I'll be
Exactly.
over the moon. When it comes to Echo, I think we all overall enjoyed it. Is that kind of the sentiment?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was good. The parts that worked, I thought worked really well, which was largely Echo, Maya's characterization, and then her relationship with Kingpin. And then a lot of the flashback scenes worked well. But then there was just some of the stuff going on, with the family that wasn't directly involving her, I thought was slow. And there's some issues with the show overall, but I thought it was good.
I agree. I will say, having watched all the trailers before diving into the actual show, that I did think it was going to be taking place a little bit more in NYC, a little bit more fast paced slash action oriented. That being said, I still really had a really good time and I enjoyed the slower moments. I felt like those were some of the moments where we got to really, again, understand Maya a little bit better, understand where she was coming from. And so, like, overall for me, it was a show that I would recommend. I, again, do think that it could have benefited from fleshing out some of the themes and storylines occurring. So I was a little disappointed that it was only 5 episodes. So I was like hopeful, hey, maybe we'll do it right with 5 episodes. Because we also have been covering on the podcast the Percy Jackson and the Olympians show. And I think that's going to be 8 total episodes, but the episodes are like a little bit on the shorter end, like around like 30, 40 minutes long as well. But I feel like that's a story that's actually working really well as smaller, shorter episodes. And so that's one of the few shows on Disney Plus that I feel is, at least for me personally, working as a shorter episode story, TV show. But all that being said, I did have a good time. I'm definitely interested to see where her character goes in the future in the MCU, and I'm hoping that we see her even as a cameo or major side character sometime in the near future.
I feel like I've spent most of this episode hating on it, but I liked it overall and I would watch it again. It was still a great experience to sit down and binge it. And if you see me out on the street, I still am a huge proponent of Marvel and I will die on any Marvel hill. We're still fine. This is still good. This is not by any means Secret Invasion level disappointment.
No.
We're doing good. We're doing great.
Yeah, I think it was one of the middle range of Marvel shows where it wasn't Loki or WandaVision level, but it also wasn't like Secret Invasion. It's in the middle for me around the Hawkeye, Miss Marvel.
C+ tier.
So I have that, C+, B- tier, yeah.
Nice. I was going to ask you both while I had you here. When it comes to What If Season 2, I did genuinely try. I got through about halfway of episode 1, then I turned it off. But I was going to ask you, though, is it good? Should I turn it back on? Should I continue watching it?
Okay, you know how you and I were both complaining about the lack of culture in this episode?
Yes.
I don't want to spoil anything, but there is a character that they do a really great job of, and it's a totally brand new character. She does not exist in the comics at all. She is a brand new character for just What If, and she's a man. It's so good, in my opinion. But to be fair, there are like 2 episodes that weren't my fave, but they're great. It's great. I love it.
Have you watched all season 2? John?
I was able to watch about half of it, and then I haven't had a chance to finish it yet, though.
Made you watch Echo instead.
Yeah, I watched Echo instead, and then I don't know when, probably next week or the week after, I'll finish What If, but I really have liked it so far. I'm about halfway through, and one of the episodes was meh for me, but the others were really good. Even the meh one was like, it was a nice little Christmas episode.
It sticks the landing. Some of these series stink with the season finale, but it does a great job.
Okay, it's good to know. I will give it a genuine second shot.
And this one, at least the first half of it's been very Guardians heavy. 2 of the first 4 episodes, I think, were Guardian-based episodes, like Guardians of the Galaxy.
Yep.
And I really like that. Guardians, outside of Avengers, is my favorite of the many franchises within the MCU.
Same. I think Guardians 3 is probably the best MCU movie that's come out in the last few years for me, personally. Cool. I will give it a genuine second shot. I think what happened is I started up and then I was like, why do I care? It's all like the what if, right? I think that's been like the hard part for me.
I think that's why I like What If so much, is because I like these characters so much. This is what I do in my brain on a daily basis. So to get to watch it and see what someone else did with this character is exciting to me, because it's basically just fan fiction or like fangirling on a screen. And I love it. And that's me. That is what I do. Yep.
If you were an MCU show, it would be What If.
Yep, exactly.
That makes sense. That frames your takeaway for me.
So watch it or else, Chris.
Right. Next time I talk to you, hey,
Or
you
else we'll
binged
ask
the
you
whole
again.
thing. Yeah. When it comes to moving forward, I know they're going to make a season 3 of What If. And then for this year, I don't really have very much. Did you guys watch the Madam Web trailer yet?
I did. I don't know. I love Spider-Man, and he's got some really cool villains, but I just don't feel that excited about watching stuff in the Spider-Verse without Spider-Man. So I don't know if I will watch it or not.
I will say, speaking of Spider-Man, I think it's cool if they go street style with Kingpin taking over NYC and Spider-Man's there.
And that's Spider-Man. Oh,
That would
are you
be
saying
dope.
that's like
That would be great.
somehow Spider-Man has to stop him from rigging the election or something for Spider-Man 4?
Exactly. I think it would work because Fiska's a great villain and Spider-Man's Spider-Man. And we'll probably have more of a grounded Spider-Man version with his homemade suit and everything.
But none of the 3 Spider-Man, like Tom Holland ones, have been like a street level New York adventure. The first 2 were like street level, but neither of them were like New York based.
Oh, that's true.
They completely took him out of his normal stomping grounds, what he is known for. And Kingpin literally is a Spider-Man villain. He's used in the Daredevil comics too, but he is a Spider-Man villain, so it's interesting that he's mostly been like a Daredevil focus on screen so far.
Into the Spider-Verse, he's the villain for that, though. Mainly Peter Parker. Like, that was more Miles.
And
Yes.
I don't know if you play video games, but he is the first villain in the PlayStation 4 Spider-Man game. That's really good.
Oh, yeah, he is. I played that one. I played the Miles Morales one. I got the second one for Christmas, but I haven't yet played it.
I don't have a PlayStation 5, so I did not get the second one for Christmas.
Those games are very good. I do enjoy playing as Spidey. I think there's a bunch of villains in the second game. Like they got Sandman in there, and yeah. All that to say, if they do have Kingpin and Tom Holland Spider-Man in the future facing off, I think that would work really well. I think that'd be a really great villain for Spidey to be going up against in a future film.
Especially with how the ending of No Way Home, like the third act is pretty dark for Peter Parker. And so I feel like a more gritty, mature version of Spider-Man. Still very quippy and lighthearted at times, but overall with some depth, some scars, going against someone like Kingpin. And you have the finesse versus the brute power, and just stylistically, the fighting would be cool, as well as just worldview. And both of them have some serious baggage now, and it could be really cool.
And maybe if they don't ever do it in the real one, maybe there's a what if episode.
I would definitely tune in for that. 100%. You'll like text me in 5 years like, hey, Chris, guess what?
What
you
if
see
season 7? You got to check it out.
Like, oh God, now I gotta sludge through 6 seasons, catch up. This is really fun, guys. Thank you so much for joining me on the podcast and dive into Echo. And again, thank you for binging TV so we could get a quick turnaround on this episode that'll hopefully have out very soon. I appreciate you. And I know there isn't a whole lot of Marvel content coming out this year, but I'm really glad that we at least got together and covered this one.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. Thanks for having me on, Chris.
Of course, yeah. Always happy to have you on. If you guys haven't yet checked out John and I and Adam's coverage of Everything Everywhere All at Once, I had a lot of fun doing that. And that came out a few weeks ago, so definitely go check that out if you haven't already.
Goodbye, everyone.
Thank you so much for spending some time with us today on the Cinema Club. I would encourage you, if you have not yet already done so, to join the Cinema Club Facebook group at facebook.com/groups/the Cinema Club TCC. And I am sure you're listening to this on the streaming platform of your choice, but just to make you aware of options, we are available on Spotify, Stitcher, Google Play, also YouTube now at the Cinema Club Podcast. If you would be interested in potentially being on the Cinema Club in the future, feel free to email us at the cinemaclubtcc@gmail.com. And finally, again, we are completely supported by you, our listeners. So if you are loving the show, if you are feeling generous, please consider clicking the support button on our website. You can check that out at podcasters.spotify.com/pod/show/Cinema Club. Thank you again so much, and we will see you on the next one.